This is the real reason the USA can never sanction China. But what if they do?
President Biden announced a series of major tariffs today on several Chinese imports. The world's two largest economic superpowers are colliding.
We've already imposed sanctions on more than 100 Chinese entities, export controls, etc. And we're fully prepared to act, take additional measures.
It's lower than last year, only 2.8%. One of the pressures weighing the world down, of course, is Russia's war with Ukraine. More now of my exclusive interview with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. You must, in these IMF meetings, be talking about the Russia sanctions. And I wanted to ask you, when you look at them, what is the piece of evidence you could point to that conclusively demonstrates that they are actually working and that Russia is being substantially deprived of revenues?
It's no secret that the president, this entire administration, has been concerned about unfair practices by the PRC that harm American workers and businesses.
So, why is it that the United States can't seem to get along? Why is the U.S. threatening to sanction China at every turn? And what kind of havoc awaits them when and if they ever decide to pull that trigger? Yeah, so it seems like every time you turn on the news these days, the U.S. is threatening to rip China a new one. This time they are gearing up for a move that's got a lot of people scratching their heads. They're talking about slapping sanctions on China, trying to rein them in, but hold on a sec because this plan might just backfire big time. We're diving into the deep end of economics here, but don't worry, I'll break it down for you step by step. So, why are they thinking about going after China with sanctions? Well, it's all about control. See, the US and China have been eyeing each other like two heavyweight boxers in the ring. There's tension, there's rivalry, and let's be real, there's a whole lot at stake. The US wants to keep its position as top dog on the global stage, but China's been nipping at its heels, rising up fast and strong. Now, here's where things get dicey. The US figures, hey, let's put the squeeze on China, hit them where it hurts, right in the wallet. They're thinking sanctions will make China play nice, toe the line, and dance to their tune. But hold your horses, because there's a major flaw in this plan, and it's a whopper. You see, China's not just any old opponent. They're more like that giant in a fairy tale, you know, the one with layers upon layers of armor. Sure, you can try to land a punch, but good luck making a dent. China's got a massive economy, deeply intertwined with countries all around the globe. They're not some small fry you can bully into submission. So, when the US starts waving the sanctions flag, what's China gonna do? Well, they've got their own playbook, and it's full of tricks to dodge those punches. They can turn to other countries for trade, they can flex their economic muscles, and they can even whip out their own set of sanctions in retaliation. And this is where it gets real scary. Messing with China like this could send shockwaves rippling through the global economy. It's like playing Jenga with the world's financial stability. One wrong move and the whole tower comes crashing down. Now you might be wondering, why would the US even think about taking such a risky gamble? Are they trying to shoot themselves in the foot? Well, a lot of people are scratching their heads over that very question. It's like watching a game of chicken where both sides are speeding towards a cliff and nobody's hitting the brakes. So keep watching, guys, because this showdown between the US and China is about to get wild. But before we dive headfirst into the chaos, let's take a step back and unpack what's really going on behind the scenes. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist and turn in this roller coaster ride. Picture this. A couple of years back, tensions were running high as Russia kicked off a military operation in Ukraine. The US and its buddies in Europe weren't about to let Putin have his way. So they hit Russia where it hurts, right in the wallet. They swooped in and snatched up billions in Russian central bank assets, thinking they could bring Putin to his knees and maybe even boot him out of office.
There are some who say this money should be taken from Russia's frozen central bank reserves. Would you agree with that?
I think Russia should pay for the damage that it has done to Ukraine.
Now you might think, hey, that sounds like a solid plan. But hold your horses, because this story takes a wild turn. The U.S. was banking on causing chaos in Russian markets, making people panic and pull their cash out of the banks faster than you can say Vladimir Putin. They even cut off Russia's access to the SWIFT banking system, thinking they had them cornered. At first, it seemed like the U.S. might actually pull this off. Russia's currency took a nosedive, and it looked like Putin might be sweating bullets. But what do you know? Russia had a trick up its sleeve. Instead of folding like a house of cards, they rolled with the punches and hit back harder. You see, Russia's no stranger to tough times. They've been through the ringer before, and they know how to adapt. So what did they do? They shifted gears to a war-based economy, stockpiled gold like there was no tomorrow, and started using that shiny stuff to trade goods all around the globe. Now, you might be thinking, hold up, how did they pull that off? Well, my friend, Russia's got some serious economic savvy. They tapped into their resources, got creative, and found ways to sidestep those pesky sanctions like a pro. So here's the bottom line. Despite over 16,000 sanctions thrown their way, Russia's been dodging them left and right like Floyd Mayweather. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. But every time the U.S. takes a swing, Russia pops up somewhere else, stronger than ever. And why does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Because it shows just how tough it is to play the sanctions game, especially when you're going up against a player like China. If Russia can dance around sanctions like a pro, you can bet China's got a few tricks up its sleeve too. So, as the U.S. gears up to take on China with sanctions, they might want to think twice. Because when you're playing with fire, you might just get burned. And trust me, nobody wants to see the global economy go up in flames. So, remember how the U.S. thought they had Russia by the tail, only to end up with their own banks teetering on the brink of collapse? Yeah, turns out they shot themselves in the foot big time. Last spring, Silicon Valley's big shots, Signature and Silvergate banks, went belly up faster than you can say, oh. And they weren't alone. Banks all across the U.S. were feeling the heat staring down the barrel of bankruptcy. It was like watching a domino chain reaction, and the whole financial system was trembling. But fear not, because here comes the cavalry, in the form of the Federal Reserve swooping in to save the day. They busted out the emergency loans like a firefighter battling a blaze, dousing the flames of panic and keeping the banks afloat. Crisis averted, right? Well, not so fast. Now, just when you thought things couldn't get any wackier, here comes Janet Yellen and the European Commission with a doozy of a plan. They're talking about taking that hefty $300 billion they snagged from Russia and handing it over to Ukraine. Sounds noble, right? Well, not so fast, because this move could send shockwaves rippling through the global financial landscape. Why is that, you ask? Well, for starters, it's a bit of a legal gray area, to put it mildly. Violating international law? Check. But more importantly, it's like sending up a signal flare to the whole world screaming, hey, Western financial markets ain't as safe as you think.
The United States is trampling on the principles of market economy and international trade rules. It is a blatant act of bullying and hegemony.
Think about it. If Uncle Sam and his pals are playing fast and loose with other nations' cash, who's going to trust them with their own dough? Suddenly, stashing your money in US dollars or euros doesn't sound like such a bright idea. And here's where things really start to get hairy. You've got businessmen, companies, heck, even whole countries eyeing the exit door, looking for a safer place to park their wealth. China used to be America's biggest debt buddy, but they've been dumping dollars like there's no tomorrow, swapping them out for shiny gold instead. And they're not the only ones. Central banks all around the globe have been on a gold-buying spree, scooping up as much of the shiny stuff as they can get their hands on. That's why gold's been hitting record highs left and right, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. Now, you might think cozying up to the US and EU would be a piece of cake, right? I mean, who's got beef with Uncle Sam and his pals? Well, turns out it's not as simple as that. Just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder, along comes a curveball from left field. Remember when Africa was minding its own business, and then, boom, the US threatened sanctions on Uganda over some anti-gay law? Yeah, it's not just the big players like Russia getting slapped around. Now, if you don't see eye to eye with Uncle Sam, you could wake up one morning to find your piggy bank empty. But hold on to your socks because it gets even nuttier. You know who's got a bone to pick with countries ditching the US dollar? None other than the man himself, Donald Trump. Yup, you heard that right. He's out here talking about slapping sanctions on countries who dare to stray from the almighty dollar. Talk about taking things up a notch. And while the politicians are duking it out, the rest of the world's moving on. Indonesia's president ain't mincing words. He's saying they need to spread their eggs out of the dollar basket, taking a page from Russia's playbook. And they're not alone. Countries all across the global majority, yeah, that's right, 88% of the world's population living outside the West are eyeing the exits, looking for safer shores.
We're also working to strengthen efforts to disrupt the transfer of weapons and also inputs for Russia's defense industrial base. When it comes to weapons, what we've seen, of course, is North Korea and Iran primarily providing things to Russia. But when it comes to Russia's defense industrial base, the primary contributor in this moment to that is China. We see China sharing machine tools, semiconductors, other dual-use items that have helped Russia rebuild the defense industrial base that sanctions and export controls had done so much to degrade.
So, here's the scoop. The US bigwigs are eyeing a chart from 2020 showing Russia and China cozying up and trading to the tune of $107 billion. Fast forward to 2023, and boom, that number shot up to a whopping $240 billion. Now, you'd think the US would be thrilled about all that cash flowing in, right? Wrong. They're not too pleased that China's cozying up to Russia, and they're itching to do something about it. But here's the thing. Over 85% of the world isn't on board with the whole "let's sanction Russia" train. Heck, even one of America's best buds, India, is chugging along, importing Russian crude oil like there's no tomorrow. But does that matter to the fancy folks calling the shots in Washington? Not one bit. So, what's their big plan? They're talking about slapping sanctions on Chinese banks, threatening to kick them out of the global financial club. But here's where things get dicey. Remember that saying about playing with fire? Well, the US seems to have forgotten it entirely. Let's take a trip down memory lane, shall we? Remember when they tried to put the squeeze on Russia with over 16,000 sanctions? Yeah, didn't work out too well. Instead of backing down, Russia just beefed up its military even more. And let me tell you, no matter how much cash Congress throws at Ukraine, this conflict ain't gonna end in anything but a Russian victory. And I'm not just blowing smoke here. That's straight from the mouths of America's own war experts. So, what's the bottom line here? The US might think they're playing chess, but they're about to find out they're playing checkers in a game of global geopolitics.
美方一边出台大规模援助乌克兰法案，一边又对中俄正常的经贸往来进行无端指责，这种做法极其虚伪，也十分不负责任。中方对此坚决反对。
All right, guys, it's time to bring it all home. We've covered a lot of ground, but now it's time to get down to brass tacks.
Don't say one thing and do another. That's what Xi Jinping told Antony Blinken.
Let's talk about what happens if the U.S. goes through with this whole sanctions on China business. I'll break it down for you real simple. Back in the day, the U.S. had the world wrapped around its little finger. They were top dog, the big cheese, you name it. But fast forward to today, and China's knocking on the door, big time. They're not just playing second fiddle anymore, they're leading the orchestra. Here's the rub on this whole thing. China's got leverage and they're not afraid to use it. They've got over 120 countries lining up to do business with them, and they're calling the shots. So, if China decides to say, hey, want to buy our stuff? Better use our currency. Well, you can bet your bottom dollar that's going to shake things up.
That's Wang Yi, China's foreign minister. He asked the U.S. to choose between stability or a downward spiral.
And that's why the idea of messing with Chinese banks is like playing Russian roulette with a loaded gun. It's going to backfire, big time. De-dollarization. That's countries ditching the dollar for other currencies. It's been on the rise for years now. Back in the day, the U.S. had a stranglehold on the global currency game. But now it's a whole different ball game. China's on the rise, and they're not slowing down anytime soon. By 2021, they were calling the shots, dominating global trade like nobody's business. And let me tell you, the world's taking notice. And sadly, instead of playing nice with the new kid on the block, the U.S. government's throwing a hissy fit, making enemies left and right. And you know what? It's not a good look. So let me leave you with this quote from economist Peter Schiff. If the people running our country were intentionally trying to destroy the dollar, it's not clear what they would be doing differently. Think about that for a second. We're at a crossroads, guys. The world's changing, and fast. But hey, don't take my word for it. Keep your eyes peeled because the plot's only going to thicken from here on out. Think we're wrong? Let us know in the comments section, and to watch the latest geopolitical news, watch this video here.